This PowerPoint is on the second part of writing introductions. Interesting detail. As you know, the word text refers to any type of work we can study in English: film, books, poems, plays, newspapers, ads, etc. So a textual introduction refers to the introduction we can write in an essay to introduce a text. There are three things we need in a textual introduction: an introductory sentence, some interesting detail, a proposition. I have already written an introductory sentence in response to the question, what makes Lord of the Rings such an important novel? You have been asked a question about the text you are working on, in this case, Lord of the Rings, and an introductory sentence simply ties in the first two things we need to know about the essay: the name of the creator and the name of the text. If my introductory sentence says, J.R.R. Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings in the early 20th century, I need to ask whether I have the name of the creator and the name of the text in this sentence. Well, yes, I do. But before you go straight into your argument, you need to give the second part of the introduction. The second component is interesting detail. So in the middle of your introduction, your first paragraph, you will want to give some background that ties the text to your question. Consider the important words in the question. What makes The Lord of the Rings such an important novel? What kind of detail could I consider that might help explain this? To give some interesting detail, I could consider writing about the plot of the story, just to give people a little bit of background. I could write about J.R.R. Tolkien. I could tell you something about his history, or why he wrote the book, or what might have encouraged him to write this book, or the things he liked to read, a whole number of things. I could tell you about the time it was written in. This could actually have some effect on why it was written. Things like the Diary of Anne Frank, the time in which it was written, is very important. I could tell you the point of writing it. What was Tolkien's motivation for writing this novel? And I could tell you the kinds of things that it is about. Those are some things that might make this essay interesting for a reader. You also may want to define terms, tell an anecdote, tell the historical background, describe the problem, describe the person, place or object, quote someone and discuss the quotation. These last six could also be used to discuss general arguments like whether we should wear school uniform, or is internet schooling better than normal schooling, those kind of things, whereas the first that I listed before tend to relate specifically to textual essays. So what I've decided to do is give you a little bit of the plot, some of the things that Tolkien was intending when he wrote it, and possibly a little bit of the effect that it has on people who read it. So here is my interesting detail. The Lord of the Rings is a fantasy novel in which the main character, Frodo, goes on a long and hard journey. He has to deal with many evil characters. He also has to cope with the creatures that have sprung out of Tolkien's imagination and their use of magic. This really is a fantasy novel for adults. Oh yes, I know some of you would disagree and say it's a fantasy novel for kids too. But there aren't very many fantasy novels that are for both. Most fantasy novels are written for children. So it's interesting to note that this one was probably aimed mostly at adults. Okay, that's the second part of the introduction dealt with. There is another PowerPoint on writing proposition, so you can read about this later.